What if one of the most famous miracles in human history was never really about defying gravity at all? Picture the scene as it has been told for 2,000 years. Night has fallen over the Sea of Galilee. The wind is rising, the waves are heaving, and a small wooden boat full of frightened fishermen is being tossed like a leaf on the dark water. Their teacher is not with them. And then, somewhere between the shadows and the spray, a figure appears, moving across the surface of the sea as calmly as a man crossing a quiet field. The disciples cry out, convinced they are seeing a ghost, until a familiar voice cuts through the storm. "It is I. Do not be afraid." This is the story of Jesus walking on water, and for most of us it ends right there, filed away as a miracle, a suspension of the laws of physics, something to believe or to doubt. But tonight, I want to ask you a different question. What if this story was never meant to be read only with the eyes, but with something deeper? What if the water itself is trying to tell us something? Because in the ancient world, water was never just water. It was a symbol, heavy with meaning, and the sea in particular carried the weight of everything humanity feared and could not control. So what happens if we read this story, not only as a physical event, but as a mirror, a portrait of the human soul standing face to face, with fear, with the unconscious mind, with emotional chaos, with the possibility of spiritual transformation? What if the storm is the storm inside you, and the water is everything in your life that feels unstable, unpredictable, and dark? If you are fascinated by the hidden meanings behind the teachings of Jesus, by ancient symbols, consciousness, and the mysterious connection between spirituality and the human mind, subscribe to the channel now. In this video, we will explore historical traditions, biblical symbolism, later esoteric interpretations, and the idea of Christ consciousness from a critical yet open-minded perspective. We are not here to tear the story down, and we are not here to take it blindly. We are here to look closer. Because here is the paradox that sits at the heart of this narrative. If Jesus could walk across chaotic water while grown men, experienced fishermen who had spent their whole lives on this sea, clung to the sides of their boat in terror, then he understood something they did not, something perhaps that most of us still do not understand. The question that will guide us through this entire journey is deceptively simple. Was walking on water an escape from the laws of nature, or was it a demonstration of mastery over an inner world, the world of fear, doubt, and the restless depths of the mind? Think about your own life for a moment. You have probably never stood on a storm-tossed lake at 3 in the morning, but you have almost certainly stood at the edge of your own dark water. The sleepless night before a decision that could change everything. The season when your finances, your relationships, or your sense of who you are felt like they were sliding out from under your feet. In those moments, you know exactly what it feels like to be inside that boat, gripping the wood, watching the waves grow taller, wondering if you will make it through. The disciples' fear is not ancient history. It is Tuesday afternoon. It is the quiet panic we all carry, and that is precisely why this story refuses to fade. Across centuries, across traditions, people have returned to this image of a man standing serenely on the very thing that terrifies everyone else, because something in us recognizes it as a possibility, a hint of what human consciousness might become. Not the elimination of the storm, but a different relationship with it. Not the absence of deep water, but the ability to move across it without being swallowed. So before we step out of the boat ourselves, we need to understand what we are stepping onto. We need to go back, far back, before the Gospels were ever written, to a time when water was one of the most powerful symbols the human mind had ever conceived. Because when we understand what water meant to the ancient world, to Egypt, to Mesopotamia, to the Hebrew imagination, the choice of setting for this miracle stops looking like an accident and starts looking like a message. And that is exactly where our journey begins. Imagine, for a moment, a world without maps of the ocean floor, without weather forecasts, without any science of the deep. To the ancient mind, water was not simply an element. It was a living mystery, a presence that gave life with one hand and took it away with the other. It fell from the sky as blessing and rose from the sea as destruction. And because it could never be fully known, never fully controlled, it became the perfect symbol for everything in existence that lies beyond human mastery. In ancient Egypt, before the world was the world, there was none, the primordial water. Not an ocean as we imagine it, but a boundless, dark, formless deep from which all creation emerged. To the Egyptians, everything that exists rose out of that water like the first mound of earth rising from the Nile's flood. Creation itself was an act of standing upon chaos, of order lifting its head above the formless. Hold on to that image because we will see it again. Travel east to Mesopotamia, and you find the same intuition in different clothing. Their creation stories begin with primordial waters, with the mingling of the fresh and the salt, with a churning deep that had to be confronted before a cosmos could be built. Order did not simply appear in these myths. It had to be won, wrestled out of the water. For these people, the deep was the raw material of reality and the enemy of stability at the same time. The Greek philosophers, in their own way, arrived at the same threshold. When Thales, often called the first philosopher, asked what everything is made of, his answer was water, not because he had run an experiment, but because he sensed something the myths had always sensed. That beneath the solid surfaces of life, there is something fluid, something shifting, something that takes every shape and holds none. And then there is the Hebrew imagination, the world that shaped the Gospels themselves. Open the very first lines of Genesis, and you find darkness over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. In the Hebrew mind, the sea was rarely a friend. It was the place of Leviathan, the domain of forces no human hand could tame. The Psalms cry out from deep waters as an image of despair. The flood swallows a corrupted world. Jonah descends into the sea as into death itself. Again and again, water stands for the chaos that surrounds fragile human order, the uncontrollable that presses in on every side of our small lit rooms. So notice what has happened. Across cultures that never met, across centuries that never touched, the same symbol keeps surfacing. Water as the before, the beneath, the beyond. Water as the unconscious depths under the daylight mind. Water as death, and strangely, also as rebirth, because the ancient world understood something we are only now rediscovering. That the thing which threatens to dissolve you is often the same thing that transforms you. Christianity inherited all of this and deepened it. When a person is baptized, they are lowered into water as into a grave and raised out of it as into a new life. The water does not merely wash the body. Symbolically, it drowns the old self. Death and rebirth in a single gesture. The early church did not choose water for baptism at random. It chose water because water already meant dissolution and renewal, the ending of one form and the beginning of another. Now, with all of that in your mind, return to the Sea of Galilee. Return to that dark night, that struggling boat, those exhausted men. When the gospel writers tell us that Jesus came to them walking on the sea, they were not writing for people who thought of water as scenery. They were writing for people whose entire symbolic universe understood the deep as chaos, fear, death, the untamable. To walk upon it was not just to defy physics. In the language of the ancient soul, it was to stand sovereign over everything that has ever threatened to swallow a human being. Which means the setting of this story is not background. It is the message. The sea was chosen, or remembered, or told, precisely because of everything it carried. And once we see that, the scene itself begins to open like a door. So let us step through it. Let us return to that night on the water, slow it down, and watch what actually happens when the deep begins to rage, and a figure appears where no figure should be able to stand. It is the fourth watch of the night, somewhere between 3 and 6 in the morning, the darkest and coldest hours. the hours when the body is weakest and the mind plays its cruelest tricks. Notice that detail because it is easy to skip past it. The gospel writers could have set this scene at dusk or at dawn. They did not. They placed it at the exact hour when human strength runs out. The disciples have been rowing against the wind for most of the night. These are fishermen, men who know this lake, men whose hands are shaped by oars and nets, and even they are losing. The boat is being battered, pushed backward, held in place by a wind that will not relent. Hours of effort and no progress at all. If you have ever fought with everything you have and still felt the current pushing you back, you already know this scene from the inside. And here is another sign we tend to overlook. Jesus is not in the boat. He sent the disciples ahead deliberately and stayed behind on the mountain alone to pray. Read that slowly. The story is quietly telling us that before anyone walks on water, there is stillness. There is solitude. There is a turning inward, high above the noise, before there is any mastery over the deep. The mountain and the sea sit at opposite ends of the ancient symbolic world, height and depth, clarity and chaos, and Jesus moves from one to the other in a single night. The crowd never sees that part. Even the disciples do not see it. The preparation for the miracle is invisible, which may be the most honest thing this story ever tells us. Then something appears on the horizon. A shape moving across the water where nothing should be able to move. And the disciples, these grown men, these hardened workers of the sea, cry out in terror. They think it is a ghost. Pause there, because this is the detail almost everyone rushes past. Their first instinct when the sacred approaches them in an unfamiliar form is fear. Not wonder, not recognition. Fear. They have walked beside this man, eaten with him, listened to him for months, and still, when he comes to them in a way they have never seen before, they do not recognize him. How often does that happen to us? Something arrives in our lives that does not match our categories, and our first response is to name it a threat, a phantom, something to brace against. The story seems to suggest that what saves us often approaches us first as what frightens us. And then, through the wind, a voice, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." In the original Greek, the phrase is stark and strange, ego eimi I am. To Jewish ears, those words carried an echo far older than that night. The name spoken from the burning bush, the voice of being itself. Whether you read that historically or symbolically, the structure is the same. Into the chaos comes not an argument, not an explanation, but a presence. The storm does not stop at this moment. Notice that. The wind is still howling when the voice speaks. The reassurance comes inside the chaos, not after it. Whatever this story is teaching, it is not teaching that peace waits on the other side of the storm. It is showing peace standing upright in the middle of it. So hold the image for a moment. A boat full of exhausted, frightened men, gripping the one structure they trust, and a figure standing on the very thing they fear most. Calm, unhurried, at home upon the deep. Two states of being separated by a few meters of raging water. Inside the boat, safety that has become a kind of prison. Outside the boat, danger that has become, for one consciousness at least, solid ground. Every overlooked detail in this scene has been quietly building toward that contrast. The hour of exhaustion, the solitary prayer, the terror of misrecognition, the voice inside the wind. And it is precisely at this moment, in the gap between the boat and the figure, that one man does something no one else dares to do. Peter looks out at the impossible, and instead of shrinking back, he speaks. What he asks for, and what happens when he receives it, will turn this story from a miracle we watch into a mirror we cannot look away from. But before we follow him over the side, we need to understand what he is really stepping out of, and what has actually been raging against that boat all night. Because the true antagonist of this story may not be the water at all. Think about what fear actually does to a person in the dark. It does not announce itself as fear. It disguises itself as reason, as caution, as the sensible voice that says, "Stay where you are." And that is exactly what is happening inside that boat. 12 men, gripping the wood, telling themselves that the boat is the only thing keeping them alive. But look closer, and you begin to see that the real enemy of this night was never the sea. The sea is simply doing what the sea does. The wind is simply wind. The true antagonist is invisible, and it lives inside each man's chest. It is the fear of losing control, the fear of the unknown pressing in from every side, the fear of death, yes, but also something quieter and more corrosive, the fear of stepping beyond the edges of the life you already know. Consider what the boat really is in this story. It protects them, absolutely. It is the reason they are still breathing. But that same protection has a shadow. The boat is also a boundary. It defines where they can go and where they cannot. It is the familiar identity, the inherited beliefs, the comfortable habits, everything that keeps a person safe and, at the very same time, keeps a person small. And here is the uncomfortable truth most of us live with every single day. The thing that shelters you eventually becomes the thing that confines you. The job you stay in because leaving is terrifying. The relationship, the routine, the version of yourself that everyone expects. All boats, all protecting you, all quietly holding you in place, while the water of everything you have never dared to face crashes against the hull. You have felt this. That night when you lay awake and the worries came in waves, one after another, and you gripped the edges of your familiar life, like those men gripped the sides of their boat. The storm was not outside your window. The storm was in your mind, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of what might happen if you let go. That is why this ancient scene still lands with such force after 2,000 years. It is not describing weather on a lake in Galilee. It is describing a condition of the human soul, the boat against the water, safety against the unknown, the self you have built against the self you might become. And into this standoff, Jesus does something that shatters the entire equation. He does not calm the storm from a distance. He does not climb into another boat. He walks directly onto the very thing the disciples are most afraid of. He places his feet on chaos itself, and it holds him. Read symbolically, this is one of the most radical images in all of Scripture. The higher consciousness does not need the boat, because it does not relate to the water the way frightened minds do. What terrifies the disciples is, for him, simply a surface. Same sea, same wind, same darkness, but a completely different relationship to all of it. The storm has no power over a mind that is not at war with itself, which raises the question the whole story has been quietly preparing us for. Is that relationship reserved for him alone? Or is it something a human being, an ordinary, doubting, impulsive human being, could actually touch? Because there is one man in that boat who cannot stop looking at the figure on the waves. One man in whom something stronger than fear is beginning to stir. Peter is not the wisest of the 12, not the calmest, not the most disciplined. He is impulsive, unfinished, painfully human, and that is precisely why he matters. He is not watching a miracle the way the others are. He is hearing an invitation. Something in him recognizes that what he is seeing is not just about Jesus. It is about what might be possible for him. And so, with the wind still screaming and the boat still heaving beneath his feet, Peter opens his mouth and asks for the one thing no sane person would ask for. He asks to come out onto the water. What happens in the next few moments, the stepping, the walking, the wavering, the sinking, will compress the entire spiritual journey of a human life into a single breathless scene. And it begins with a single word, spoken across the storm. A word that is still being spoken to every one of us. Come, and Peter goes. Watch this moment carefully, because it may be the most overlooked miracle in the entire story. Peter swings his leg over the side of the boat, and for a few impossible seconds, an ordinary fisherman does what only Jesus has done. The water holds. The story is no longer about one extraordinary man. It has quietly become a story about human potential, about what happens when a person trusts a call more than they trust their circumstances. But then something shifts. The gospel gives us the exact cause, and it is worth slowing down to hear it. Peter does not sink because the water changes. He sinks because his attention changes. The text says he saw the wind. Think about that. You cannot see wind. What Peter saw was everything the wind was doing. The spray, the whitecaps, the chaos. And in that instant, the storm moved from the edge of his awareness to the center of it. His eyes left the face of Christ and locked onto the very thing that threatened him. And the moment fear became the object of his focus, fear became the ruler of his experience. This is the deeper causal layer of the story, and it is quietly devastating. Peter does not fail because he lacks strength. He does not fail because the miracle ran out. He fails because consciousness can only be anchored to one master at a time, and he transferred his anchor from trust to terror. The sequence unfolds like a formula written into human nature itself. Faith opens the way. Action steps onto it. Doubt divides the mind. Fear floods the divided space. And sinking is simply what fear feels like when it finishes its work. Not punishment, consequence. The water did not pull him down. His own inner state did. And here is where the story reaches out of the first century and touches your life directly. Because you have lived this sequence. You have stood in a moment when something called you forward, a new beginning, a difficult conversation, a leap you knew you were meant to take, and for a while you walked. You were doing the impossible thing, and then you saw the wind. You read the discouraging message. You imagined the failure. You heard the old voice that says people like you do not walk on water. And the moment that voice became louder than the call, you felt yourself begin to go under. Not because the path stopped holding you, but because you stopped trusting the path. Think of the person who finally starts speaking honestly in a broken relationship, and for a few days the honesty holds them, until one cold reaction sends them back into silence. Think of the one who leaves a soul-crushing job to build something true, and walks steadily until the first empty month, when the numbers become the wind and panic becomes the sea. The storm was always there. What changed was where they were looking. But do not miss what happens next in the story, because it is the most tender detail of all. Peter, sinking, terrified, half swallowed by the very chaos he feared, does one thing right. He cries out. And the text says Jesus reached out his hand immediately. Not after a lecture, not after Peter proved himself worthy again. Immediately. Whatever this story is teaching, it is not teaching that fear disqualifies you. It is teaching that even in mid-sink, even with the water at your throat, the higher awareness you turned away from is still only one reach away. The gentle rebuke that follows, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" is not spoken from the shore. It is spoken from the water, hand in hand, on the way back up. So the question the story leaves burning in us is not whether we will feel the wind. We will. It is whether we can learn to notice, in real time, the moment our gaze begins to drift from the call to the chaos, and choose again and again where our attention lives. Because if sinking begins with a shift of focus, then rising begins with one too. And that realization changes everything about how we read the rest of this story. Because if Peter's fall was an inner event, then his walk was an inner achievement, and every element of this scene, the water, the wind, the boat, the outstretched hand, begins to look less like scenery and more like a map of consciousness itself, drawn in symbols, waiting for us to read it. And when we follow that map into our own time, into our own storms, the ancient question becomes startlingly personal. What does it actually mean, here and now, for you to walk on water? Perhaps it begins with the honest admission that your sea does not look like Galilee at all. Your sea looks like the email you are afraid to open, the diagnosis you did not expect, the silence after a relationship ends, the 3 a.m. ceiling when every fear you have quietly collected comes out to speak at once. These are the waters of a modern life, and they are no less dark, no less deep than the ones Peter stepped onto. And here is where so many of us make the mistake. The story has been gently warning us about all along. We believe that walking on water means the water must first become calm. We wait for the storm to end before we live. We tell ourselves that once the anxiety fades, once the finances stabilize, once the uncertainty passes, then we will step out, then we will become who we are meant to be. But the sea in this story never calms before Jesus walks on it. He walks on it while it rages. The mastery does not come after the chaos ends. The mastery is what makes the chaos lose its authority. Think of someone you have known who carried this quality. Perhaps a grandmother who buried a husband and still rose each morning to tend her garden, her hands steady in the soil, while grief moved beneath her like a tide. Perhaps a friend who lost everything in a single year and somehow did not lose themselves, who still laughed, still loved, still showed up. They were not untouched by the water. They were not pretending the storm away. They had simply learned, somewhere in the depths of their own suffering, that they were not the storm. They could feel it without becoming it. That is walking on water. Not the absence of waves, but the presence of something in you the waves cannot reach. And this is where the story stops being ancient and becomes almost unbearably intimate, because the boat is still with us. Every one of us has one. The familiar identity, the safe routine, the version of ourselves that has never been tested. And every one of us, at some point, hears the voice from out on the water saying, "Come," the invitation to step beyond what we know into what we fear. The story does not promise that we will walk perfectly. Peter did not. It promises something quieter and perhaps more merciful. That even when we sink, even when fear floods back in and the water closes over us, the hand is there. The deeper consciousness we forgot in our panic has not forgotten us. The reaching down is part of the walking. The rescue is woven into the risk. Maybe that is the final secret hidden in this scene. That failure on the water is not the opposite of faith, but part of its education. Peter sank. Yes, but Peter also learned what the 11 who stayed in the boat could never learn. What the water feels like beneath a believing foot. He carried that knowledge for the rest of his life, and perhaps we are meant to carry it too. Each time we step out, each time we falter, each time we are lifted again. So let the sea remain the sea. Let the wind blow as it will. You were never asked to silence the world. You were asked something far more tender, far more possible. To find beneath all your fear a stillness that does not belong to the storm. It has been in you all along, waiting like a calm beneath the waves, older than your anxiety, deeper than your doubt. The water will always be there, restless and unknown. But so will the part of you that can stand upon it. And in the end, that may be what this story has been whispering across 2,000 years of nights and storms and trembling hearts. Not walk on water so that the world will be amazed, but walk on water so that you will finally know. The depths were never your enemy. They were the place where you discovered what holds you. And whatever name you give to that holding, grace, consciousness, the Christ within, the quiet center of your own soul, it is closer than the fear. It always was. Step out and let it carry you home.